All right, this is the hologram. Except for the title card, this is a done version of it. Okay, so I didn't add the title card in here like I said before. You're in charge of adding the title card, changing the number, changing the title, having a nice transition go into this so that we don't see it like jump. We don't see it just skip right into it. We want to see title card, transition right into the hologram thing. Okay, so you can see these pieces down here are animating. This little dial is spinning. Once we get to that. There's a piece of text that's going across here. And then it's also 3D. So you saw a small thing. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but just a small thing where you saw these things actually move in 3D. Okay? Once we understand the 3D in this assignment, that carries into the next assignment for doing all of that stuff. Okay? Let me go to my examples, and let's go through a couple other things that we haven't covered yet. The last ones I talked about were, I believe this, no, not that one. I did that one. Lines. Okay, yeah. I don't have the earth one. I thought that one was still in here. I must have gotten rid of it. So let's do this one first. So this is a 3D cube, basically, okay? And the idea with this is that I've created an animation, and then I've duplicated it, and then made it look like this 3D box, and then that makes it look like that. So the way I started this off is I made a composition that was the proportions of what I wanted this side to be, okay? So if I wanted it to be, let's say, this wide and then really tall, I kind of just estimated what I wanted the sizing to be here. So for the width, I think I went to 200, and for the height, maybe 800. Make sure all my frame rates are still the same. The duration, I made this, just really long so that it fit. So there it is. And then I just made whatever I wanted one side of this tower to look like. For now, I'm just going to throw in a solid. And I'll go to my transition. I showed the Venetian blinds before. That's how I did the lines on my hologram to look kind of pixelated. Which one did I want to use? Card wipe? Grid wipe. That was it. So on grid wipe, here's completion, and you'll see it does this. So fancy. If I change this to doors, and I change the direction here to like that. I actually type in 90. There we go. I get these cool like vertical like grid pattern. It looks kind of neat. There's also under, oops, click there, click here. Under generate, there's also a grid right here. But the grid's uniform. I like this one because it's not uniform. It has a variety of different shapes in it. So for now, I'm just going to do that. Whatever kind of animation I would want on this, I would just put onto there. I'll show you mine in a second. Okay. Let me rename my composition. Example bar 3D. Right. Oops. And then I just hit all my stuff. So let me reset my workspace. There we go. All right. So I'm going to take this, make a new composition. 960 by 540, 30 frames per second. And I'm going to drop that example into here and then just scale it down. Now what I need to do is I need to make this look like it's 3D. Right now obviously it's not 3D. We will not find a plugin that will just allow us to drop it on there and make it look 3D. We're actually going to do fake 3D. So I'm going to hit my toggle switches and modes. This far right button here is the 3D button. And what that does is it gives us, instead of just X, Y, we get X, Y, and Z. Instead of just rotate X, or rotate one direction, we get rotate X, Y, and Z, plus we get this orientation, okay? And the same thing with scale. We now have 3 scales. So I'm going to go to my position, or my anchor point, and move the anchor point to one of these corners. I'm going to go to my rotate, and I'm going to just duplicate this, and then rotate this around in the Y direction. And I think I'm going to go back 90 degrees. Okay. Now, you can't see it too good, but there is basically the front of this, and then there's the side of this. That's what we just created. So I'm going to grab this again, move the pivot to the other side, duplicate it, and then rotate that one 90 degrees. Now I'm going to go into a different view. So right now I'm in my active camera. I'm going to go to the top. And this is what we've created so far. There's the front and these two sides. If I click on one of these, move the pivot to this side, then duplicate it, and then rotate it another 90 degrees. So that'll be negative 180. Now I have a cube. So then I go back here to my active camera. I need to rotate the whole thing around. That's what makes it look 3D. I can't just grab all of these and rotate them because it just does that and breaks it apart. So I need some way to grab all of these at the same time and rotate all of these as a group. That's where a null comes in. And a null is just a blank object. It's just an item for us to be able to grab and control other things with it. So I'm going to go to my null. I'm going to switch back to my top view. Make sure the null is in the center of the area. So about there. I can throw up some guides too and make this a little bit easier. So let's go guide right about there. Put a guide right about there. Now it's pretty close, right? It's pretty close. Let's see, I'm right on. Look at that. All right, so then I'm just going to take all of these pieces, go to the parent, and make them parented to the null. That means whenever the null moves, rotates, scales, whatever, those items are going to do the same thing, but as a collection. It's kind of like grouping all these things together. The null is not 3D, so I'll make the null 3D. I'll switch back to my active camera. And now if I grab the null and I go to rotate, and I grab the Y rotation, you can see how this thing is then spinning around. And you can see that my null is no longer in the correct spot because I made it 3D after I positioned it. So let's undo our parenting, back to our top view, make this 3D, there we go. And then push the null back in the Z direction, right there. And I'll also move it to the bottom in case I decide I want to scale it or something. That might help. There we go. All right, so now back to parenting, grab all the stuff, parent this to the null. Cool. And so now I go to my rotate Y and spin it around, and now I have this like 3D thing spinning around. So it's pretty neat. I jump back to my bar example. I'm going to go to Effect, I'm going to go to Transition, and I'll just add a linear wipe to this. Again, you could add whatever you wanted. Any kind of transition, if you had something like that, you could utilize. I'm going to make this 0, and I'm going to make it, 180. There we go. And I'm just going to animate it doing this, just growing. So nothing, go up to, let's say, 4 seconds, and then pull that down. So now this thing just grows. Maybe I'll give it a little bit of a feather. Now, let's see what a big feather does on that. That's cool. All right, so now when we come here, I'm just going to set a keyframe on this, go up to, let's say, 6 seconds, rotate it, and now we have this that's growing and 3D at the same time. Now on mine, I also did, I offset each one. So if I were to take each one of these things, just like we did our page transitions, and I just scooted these down some, then we'll get it so that we don't see all of them growing at the exact same time. They're kind of all coming in on their own speed. And I could do other stuff too to this. This isn't just let me turn this back to auto. There we go, see it better. I could have different kinds of things like twinkling or glowing or whatever else inside here. Okay? This is very similar to how we're going to do the house. If you have a house or a square building on the other one, I'm just going to, here's a plane, I'm just going to position them so they look like they're 3D. And then we can fly a camera right through it. Okay? Now on mine, where are my examples? Way over here. There's this. Here are my growing bars. So I'm just going to double click one. And this is the animation that I have on mine. So I just made it so that I still have that grid pattern at the top, or at the sides of this. You can see all the dots. And I animated all these shapes just kind of like coming in, kind of in a stepped fashion. It's not like they all just grow evenly. It's more of a digital kind of stepping motion that happens. Okay, and then I added that in here, and then I get that. Okay, now I also added a light to this. If I turn the light off, well, let me turn the light, like delete the light. And then I have to go to my settings here and here. Oh, let me undo that. Let me just go to the one I showed here, growing bars. Nope. There it is. Let me make this composition setting black in the background. There we go. Okay. Just to give it some variety of colors, I added a light into this. And this is a point light. I think I just left it default settings pretty much. And what this will do is it'll give a range of colors to it. So wherever the light is, you can see how it's affecting the shading on here. So everything is not going to be uniformly lit, which gives it a nice look to it. I'll go back to the top view. I'll move this to the middle of it, which is where I had mine. Back to my active camera. I can double click the point light, change the intensity. Now once you add something that's 3D, on each one of those items that's 3D, you get these other properties, which are material options. So you can adjust things like casting shadows. If you want them to cast shadows, you can. If you want them to accept shadows, you can. If you want them to accept lights, you can. You can play with the ambient. Let me zoom in so we can see this. This isn't going to affect much right now because we have the light in there. But if I go to the diffuse, you can see how this is affecting how much brighter that is. If I go to the specularity, again, you can see how much brighter that is. Here's the shininess. Oops, make sure all of these are selected. There we go. Specular intensity, shininess. Metal is just how it's reflecting. You can see it changes it slightly. This is, for this kind of thing, it's not going to be anything insane. Something like that. Okay. So then now as this thing moves, you can see how it starts off darker, and then we have this kind of like glimmering as it's moving upwards because we have the light inside there.
Can you tell your class about
All right. So with this, you see we definitely get this kind of neat thing in here, which is not just a regular piece of artwork. It's, you know, this kind of glimmering 3D thing that looks kind of neat on our stuff. And we can always jump back to that original comp and tweak what that original comp looked like too to change what we are looking at, okay? I think I'll make that light just a bit brighter. There we go. And then without the light, it just goes away now because I have the light in the scene. I've changed some of my settings. Okay, so that's another thing that you may want to add to yours, or you know, you may have a opportunity to add that. This here is a spherical blip, and if I hit play, and I take this to third so we can actually see it faster. All I did here was I made a blip, just like I've shown before, just these like radial things that kind of just go out and disappear. It's going incredibly slow. There it is. Okay, and then all I did was duplicate it in a spherical pattern. Okay, so just like I did with the cube, instead of just doing a cube, I duplicated it and kind of rotated them around. So let me go into this so you can see it. Let me go into my blip, and I'm going to put on this color here. There it is. So I have this color just so I can see what it looks like. When I go here, you can see what that looks like, okay? So that's all I've done is just duplicated this and rotated it and offset it so that it was more of a 3D shape than just being a flat piece. And then on this null, which is again controlling the movement of that, I went to the rotation and I added a wiggle expression so that it rotates with a wiggle in the X rotation, Y rotation, and Z rotation, and that's what gives it this kind of like random movement around it. For doing this kind of duplication setup here is a bit more complicated than the previous one. With this one, let me just duplicate this to another comp. We'll just go here and hide all this stuff. I'll go into my, subcomps, big blip, there it is. So here's just one of the big blips. Okay, and I have this kind of looping blip. I made it 3D. I switched to my top view. I took the anchor point, and then I pulled it back. Now, I pulled it to, I believe it's 200 is what I went to. I believe that was the number. And then when I duplicated this and I rotated it, as I rotated it, I'm looking at what is going to fit here. So if I go to 200, you see that this basically fits the edge right there if I go to 90. I said, okay, well that's not good because I want this to be more spherical. So I wanted this to be, let's say, 45 degrees. That meant that both of these had to scale down so that they would fit 45 degrees, which meant I had to go and delete that one, go here, put the pivot back, oops, then scale it down, then move the pivot again. Again, this took a little bit of time just to get it all worked out. Nope, I think I had to move this back just even further. Maybe 400 is what I went to. There we go. Yeah, so I went back to 400, and then this is, I think, 60 degrees, and then I could duplicate it again, rotate it another 60, duplicate it again, rotate it another 60, and so on. 240. 300, there we go. And I have an extra one somewhere there. All right, so now when I go back to my active camera, I have this basically like cylindrical pattern moving around. And then what I did is I went back to, let's say, the top view, and I grabbed one of these. You are right there. I duplicated him and then rotated this. Nope, I used this orientation now, one of these. Come on. There it is. And put that to, let's say, 90 degrees. And then I duplicated that, rotated it again. And then I went around to that side. Okay. Now, once I had all of these top, bottom, front, side, all this stuff set up, then I just did the same thing. I added a null. I made sure the null was centered, made sure it was 3D, and then I just took all of these, parented it to the null, and then I could take the null and just rotate it around. Right now it's not centered. You can see what it's doing. It's kind of pivoting off of one of those pieces. So I definitely want to make sure it's centered before I go any further. And then I just went back into my big blip and I turned off these bottom ones. Those are just for me to be able to see what the thing looks like. And then I, again, get this kind of like neat spherical rotating pattern. Okay, so that was, again, another thing that maybe you have a use for, maybe not. I just like to show them because you, at some point you might want to show that. Next one. Which one is this? All right, I'll get to that in a second. All right, so this one here is something called Form. This is a Trapcode plugin. In fact, Trapcode Form is the one I used here. And with this one, I'm able to actually bring in a 3D model, an actual like 3D model, and make it spin around, scale up, move around a little bit. It's not incredibly interactive. It's not incredibly quick, but it does create these little cool pieces that you could add to your stuff. Okay, this is how long it takes to load. So I hit play, you can see there's a 3D model. Okay, so this is how we start using form. Let me hide these layers here. We go to form. It comes in with this grid pattern. Let me turn this up to full so we can see it. I'm going to go to base form, and these are the different ways you can have it set up. A grid, strings, sphere layered, there it is. Or you can do an OBJ model, which is a 3D model. If I go to that, I choose my object, it brings up this list of different objects that you can use for your stuff. Okay, so these are all the ones that are pre-built. If you go to Turbo Squid, and you can find free models on here sometimes. Price, free, there we go. You don't want anything that has a lot of divisions, so this is probably a good one, very low divisions. I would download this. I don't know if I have to log in to download it, or I can just download it. I have to log in. I don't even think I have a Turbo Squid account. But you would download it, and then you'd be able to load that specific item, okay? You would just say add new object and find that OBJ file. This is a can that I had that I modeled inside of Maya, and I can use here. So you wouldn't have that one. But all these other ones are all ones that come default, okay? So there's a camera, there's a revolver, there's a rifle. Here's a tech orb, which again looks kind of like the Death Star. So there it is. It's just like, boom, it's there. Then I go to my rotation, and then I can just animate this rotating. Now again, this is not a fast plugin. You'll see that I click and drag, and then it takes a second for it to load. Okay, so I can basically just go here at the beginning, set a keyframe, or write an expression, and go to the end, and then I just hit play, and then we'll be able to see this thing kind of rotating around. Crazy slow, but we'll be able to see it. The settings for it are pretty easy to go through. If you just go through the object settings here, you can tell it where you want these to be. Right now it's on edges. You could have it do it just from the vertices, so now you just have points there. You could pull this up. We're not getting a whole lot of difference there, but we would. Oh, maybe it was just updating. Or maybe I broke it. It's possible. We can go to faces. No, it's still loading. Oh, I clicked normalize off. That's why it went away. You can see this little yellow band right here. That means it's loading. It's thinking about stuff. There it is. Way too many. Let's set this to 20. There we go. Okay. So based on different settings you have there, you'll get different results. Again, you can kind of play with it and see what you want it to do. Okay. You can also go to the shading area and add shading to this. Natural lighting, yes. Here's the particle. Here's the color. Actually, I turned shading off so you can see the color. There it is. Something like that. Color over. I don't know what all the settings do, but that looks pretty cool, right? Yeah, that's awesome. So fancy. All right, so you can play with those and kind of just mess around until you get, results that you're happy with. There's also this designer here. Lots of the Trapco plugins have these where you go into this. You find where the top of your bar is. So there you go. Now we can see it. If you go to presets, these are all different ways that you can, come on, change what this looks like. Okay, so this is no longer a 3D thing. This is just form doing this kind of like cool pattern. Same thing here. Here's this kind of cool pattern. Here's geometry. Okay, so you have the ability to use this while you're here. Like I said before with any of the trap code things, let me just hit apply. you could download it at home, use it at home, and then when you come here, the plugin will work. That's what I did. I don't have the plugin at home, so I used the free trial version of it. It had a red X when I was working, but then I come here and everything's happy and working. Okay? So just another thing that you could add to your arsenal. All right, and then the last thing I'm going to show with the example area, not that. Yes, this. Yep, okay. So the way that my hologram comes on, you see how we have this kind of like digital creation thing. It's kind of like building itself digitally. That was done just using 2 transitions. And if I go back to my examples here, I go back to this one, and I rewind it, that's the same transition right there. Okay? So if I look at this, I'm doing 2 things. One of them is a block dissolve, which is very similar to the one I showed before. Let me turn off my linear so we can see it. But this is what the block dissolve is doing. It's going from this blue here. Oh, it's going from blue. Is that my background color? Let me see. Oh, it's gray. All right, so it's going from the blue there to this white color or gray color, and then back to blue. Okay? And then I have a linear wipe. Let me turn this off. And this is what's actually turning it on and off. So now it's off, now it's on. When I put those 2 together, I get this kind of thing. And you can kind of see that linear wipe going across it, building that shape. Okay? I've adjusted my keyframes so that the block dissolve starts at 0, it goes to 100, and then it goes back to 0. That way it basically like creates these blocks and then gets rid of them. That's all I wanted to do. And then the linear wipe is what's transitioning it to kind of like come on. Some of the settings in here, I can take the feather off the linear wipe. I turned that feather off already. Turn off soft edges as well. I'll get something more digital. There's lots of different kind of settings you can play with. This is not just one, but I wanted it to kind of come on in a more kind of digital way. Like, actually I like this, just like that is pretty cool. So I could have done that too. I liked having that wipe on there. Back to my UI pieces, no. Hologram video, no. There it is. So what I did is I went to one of my areas here. So here's my main area. Nope, not that one, that's the glow. Here's my main area. I added I went into my actual artwork, so this is just a flattened out version. So inside here, you'll see all these pieces animating on. And again, that's something that makes it work, is that I didn't do it just to the entire thing all at once. I went into the individual pieces and had individual pieces have this effect happen. So here's my play line, which is right there, and as it comes in, you'll actually see like that, even though it's subtle, that also kind of digitizes onto the screen. And then my top of video, which is all of this stuff here, that does it too. And then my play area, which is right in this area, doesn't do it because you don't see it. My title box, which is way up here, that also digitizes on. My UI background, that also digitizes on. Okay? And all of their ways that they're coming on are also offset. So everything isn't happening at the same time. Everything is kind of randomly coming on. So it goes from one piece to the next piece to the next piece to the next piece in order for everything to come on correctly. Okay? So everything comes on. My hologram video does come on in the same way. I think I went too fast. There it goes. Or maybe I did something different with that one. Let's go into this. Yeah, I did something a little bit different. So I did a line sweep, which is this. You can see a line sweep happening. Then there was a grid wipe, And this is just me playing around with different transitions. These are all within this transition area here that I used. And then I had this scatter, which just gave it a little bit of noise. Okay, so just adding some keyframes, playing with the timing, I was able to get that. On my lightsaber movie here, which is my little thing, I added this Warp-O-Matic. I just wanted it to kind of distort somehow. Let me turn off. Scoot that down some. There you go. So you can see how it kind of like distorts it and kind of like comes into frame. Again, that was just something I went to a distort. I found something, played with the settings until I found something that, hey, this looks cool. I've never used Warp-O-Matic before, but I understand that what is it using? It's using the brightness in this case. I went through all of these and found that brightness was the best one. I adjusted my smoothness. I adjusted my warping amount. If I go crazier with this, you can see what it really does. That's like too much. Maybe it's not. Maybe it looks cool. No, that is too much. It's too much stuff. There we go. Pull it back down. That's cool. All right, so I did that for every piece. So here's my round dial. If I go into the composition it's being used, which is right here, here's round dial. And here's it building the round dial right. Oh, I turned it off. You can't see it if it's turned off. There it is. You only see a little smidge of it. There it is. Okay. And then the same thing with my playlist, the same thing with my levels. There they are, and there they are. Okay. All right. So now assembling the whole thing. So up to this point, I've shown creating a bunch of assets, creating different ways we can animate things, doing the transitions to get things to come onto the screen. But we haven't talked about how to actually make it look like it's actually 3D. Okay. So eventually what you're going to have is just a bunch of assets. Here's one asset that I have. If I go to my playlist, here's another asset. If I go to my round dial, here's another asset. If I go to my levels, where are you at right here, here's another asset. Okay. All of these things I need to bring into one composition. So I make a new composition like so, 960, 540, 30 frames per second, huge setting. I just bring everything into one. Here's my levels. Here's my main area. There it is. What else do we have? Playlist, round dial. Okay, so those are my 4 main items that I have. They all animate on, like so. I didn't have the other things animated in this one yet. And then I need to get these to actually interact with each other. One of the things that I found specifically with mine, because of how these things are coming out from behind it, I didn't want them to be showing right now, okay? So in each one of these things, in my, too much stuff open, let's close a bunch of these. No. UI pieces, no. No. There it is. In this round dial here, here's the round dial. And you can see how it looks like it's actually coming out from behind something. Just like I showed before, I created a mat for my video that would crop out where the mat is. I created a mat for where that thing would come out. Okay? I just basically brought in the background, and I'm using this as a transparency for all of these. Just like we did on the last assignment, the text animation one, where we can have stuff come out of different areas. It's the same exact thing. I just used that set mat and said for each one of these layers to use that other area as a mat for it. Without these on there, when it's hidden, I still see the stuff. Okay, this is just the round dial. I still see it when it's back there, and that looks stupid. So I told it to set the mat so that I wouldn't see it when it goes behind this. And then I have this other one for some reason that I needed to also have. Okay, so that was just an extra thing that I had to add. You may not have to add that. Back to that composition 1. Nope. There it is, 2. Okay, so there's all my pieces in here. If I needed to move any of these, scale them, rotate them, whatever I need to do, I move them, rotate them, scale them. You might have a composition inside of a composition inside of a composition for one of your pieces. On this piece here, if I didn't want to have this playlist, I wanted to have those bars moving up and down, I would go into that composition, drop the bars in there, and that's where they would reside, is just inside that area. Same thing down here. If I wanted something different to happen down here, something's weird happening there. Hold on a second. Levels, tab, no, is it animated? I have extra lines somehow. I don't know how that happened. Let me turn this on. All right, there's those lines. Where are the extra lines coming from? Well, it's definitely coming from that, right? Looks like it. Levels, background, tabs. All right, I'll investigate that later. All right, figure out why I have extra bars there. So if I wanted to have a different animation or something else happening here, I would go into that composition, drop whatever I want into that area. Okay. Same thing up here in this area. If I wanted something, I would go into that main area and drop whatever I wanted here. I want my globe. I'll drop that into this. That's not my globe. That's fine. I'll just use this. I'll go to my distort. I will try to find, nope, it's under perspective, CC sphere, there it is. And then I will change the radius to this. I will scoot this over here into the corner. Boom, there it is. Okay. So now I would have that as an element inside there. Okay. So you have to think of it like separate documents you're bringing together. That's usually where people get lost in this one. Okay. So everything is just a separate piece. Now I need to tie everything together so that I have these things linked somehow. For this type of setup, on mine, I want my round dial here to come out like it did, but then rotate kind of forward towards the camera. So I'm going to move my pivot for the round dial right to where I want it to pivot from, right where I'm spinning it from. Now initially when I did this, it took me a minute to find the exact spot that I wanted. I don't think it's here, but we'll find out. I'm going to make everything 3D. I'm going to go to my rotate. I'm going to go to my rotate Y. This is the green one. That's Y going up and down. So I'm going to rotate it like that. All right, that doesn't look bad. I think it works there. If I didn't like it, again, just kind of move the pivot to where I think it should be. Let's say here, and then rotate. Yeah, no, I do like it maybe there a little bit better. I don't know. No, that looks good. I like that. All right. So that's where that's going to pivot from. So I'm going to reset it. That looks good. Then I'm going to come down here to my levels. I'll make sure it's all out all the way. I'll move the pivot down here. You'll notice that my levels are animated in a different comp. They're not animated in this comp. They're animated in that other composition. Now that might mean I jump between compositions. That's what it means. Just jump between them. This one, the red is going this way, so that's the one I'm going to rotate. All right, so that looks good. And then this one over here, which is my playlist. That one's a bit easier, or just as easy. I just slide it right there where it should be pivoting from. Check out the rotate and Y. And there it is. Perfect. Okay. Hide all those. All right, so now everything is connected the way it needs to be connected. I need to be able to grab everything and rotate everything in 3D. So again, I use a null. You'll find we use nulls all the time. When we're doing a character, nulls are all over the place. Null object, make it 3D. It should be fine there. Maybe a little bit, oops. Maybe a little bit over, maybe more centered. Maybe more centered on the screen here. And then I'm going to take all these items and just parent them to the null. Okay, so now everything is 3D. Everything is parented to the null. if I go to rotate, you'll see how everything now rotates together. Okay, same thing this way. There it goes. Now, again, it's paper, so it's not like actual 3D. It's just like thin like that. All right. So now I'm going to do this. So I'm going to start lining things up. So at the very start of this, I need to get rid of that globe. So I'm just going to jump to my main area. I'm going to steal the little transition that I have here. I'm going to go to where those main elements animate in, click the globe, paste it in there, and now the globe will animate in. There it is. Maybe I'll change the block width. And this is what you want to always look at, is like, what can I change after the fact? The width is maybe too much for that. It's like, that looks good. So now it's a little bit more pixelated because it's a smaller item. It's cool. So that comes in. This is an easy way too, up at the top. Main area is where I'm currently at. If I want to go back to the previous composition, I click there. It takes me back to that composition. Okay? Easy way to navigate. So here comes the main elements kind of transitioning in. I'm going to wait for all of them to be on, like that, or pretty close. Then I'm going to go to my round dial, and I'll paste those same expressions, or those same things. I'll go to the playlist, paste them. I'll go to the levels, paste them. And then I'll just view their keyframes, and then just adjust them. So I'm going to have them go. Always think about what the viewer's looking at. Think about what animations you're having. What I don't want to have is the whole thing comes up, and then something happens here, then something happens there, then something happens here. It should have a flow to it. It comes up in the middle, and then their eye is going to go left to right, typically. So this is the furthest left. This is the farthest right, and then this is the middle. So I will scoot that over here. I will scoot this over there. A little bit of overlap is fine on each of these. You don't want this to take 1.5 years to play out. I may need to have to take this down to thirds just so I can see it. Once we get more complicated, more complex on this, our animations do take longer to render. Okay, so now it's like transitioning as it's coming out. I may have to go into each composition and change how fast they come out or when they come out. That's just part of it. You have to start getting into the OCD mindset of looking at every single piece as a whole, as a huge thing, but then also being able to go into those individual frames basically and seeing how it flows from one piece to the next to the next. You'll find that if you start doing that now, when you get to later assignments, it's a lot easier to do. So some things that I'm not terribly thrilled about is I spent a lot of time kind of animating this tab, like pulling out and coming here. Now I don't really see it. Now, as this thing is like glitching out, it's just there all of a sudden. It looks neat still, but I really have to assess whether I want that to happen. If I want it to come out faster, I go into my playlist. I go to my keyframes. What is this here? This is my light. All right, that's just that moving, and then this is that. Okay, so this is the animation coming out. I would just pull the keyframes over more. When we do something like this, we're working this composition, and that one. Don't actually move the compositions. That will screw things up, okay? If I'm in this comp here, and I want this to start later, I don't want to move that because that will mess up my time from frame to frame, or from comp to comp. All right, so now that happens a lot quicker, or it doesn't at all. Let's go back there. And then let's go back. Oh, oops. I want this to happen after that. There we go. Not before it. I'm going to go later. So that way it dissolves on, and then the tab comes out. That's good. Okay. All right. So think of it like you're setting up a timeline for this animation. What happens first? What happens second? What happens third? You may need to move stuff. You may need to move keyframes. You may need to jump into different compositions. That's all part of it. That's why I don't want you to get locked down into it has to be perfect right away, because you will go back and tweak your stuff. All right, so we're going to pretend that this is good. I would go back and tweak it a bit more maybe, just to get things to line up a bit better. Okay, now once I have this, then I want to animate the whole thing rotating so that we see more of the 3D. So I'm going to go to my null. I'm going to rewind this to the beginning. I'm going to set a keyframe on the rotate Y. I'm going to go to the end of my animation, which is about here. My video plays till about there. And then I'm just going to rotate this in that direction. Nope, this direction. I'm actually going to go to the beginning and maybe go the other way. So this will go negative. So what we should get now is it's facing one direction as it starts, and then as it plays and tweaks, it's like rotating around. And the cool thing about the null is that because it's parented, if let's say we went outside the box, all we do is scale the null down. It scales everything down uniformly. We don't have to worry about it. Okay, so you can see the rotation here. I didn't use easy ease on these specifically, but I may go back later and do that. This is the time where you have to start looking at your stuff and picking what you want eased and what you don't want eased. There's also no motion blur on anything in here. That has to come in after. That will slow things down tremendously, which is why it's off. Okay, so now we have this 3D here. Oops. I also need these things to pop out, so I'm going to go to round dial, playlist, and levels. Go to their rotates. Round dial will be rotate Y, playlist will be rotate Y, levels will be rotate X. I'll scooch you up a bit, and then rotate this, rotate that, rotate that. Okay, so now you can see them all kind of coming out. Now I could probably scoot those again, and I typically will. I don't like everything to happen all at the same time. It's very difficult to see. Sometimes it makes sense to have everything happen at the same time though, okay? You're telling a story. Someone watching this is not just here to see this hologram. They're here to see the story of how these things work. And if you have too much stuff going on, it doesn't work. They can't see what's happening, okay? Ideally, you're not showing this to your mom or dad or your brother or sister. Ideally, you're showing it to someone in the industry who's going to be able to pick it apart and see how well you've told the story about this thing, how well all these things are working together. And so you want that to flow nicely in there. Now, before I go to the next stage, I'm going to show you one more cheat that I did on those levels, because I just remembered that I wanted to show that too. So how did I do the levels before, or how did I do that animation before? Do you remember? Expressions, right? Each one was an animated shape, right? Levels animated. So let me put this up to full. Here is this, nothing happens, and then everything goes crazy, right? This is actually one layer, and if I go down here to this, that's the animation, okay? I made a new composite or a new layer. I found a piece of audio, royalty-free audio, in case I decide to use it later. It's this whatever sound effect here. I don't know if it'll play. There it is. It's kind of cool, kind of techy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that layer. I'm going to go to Effect and go to Audio, which is not down here. I'm not sure what I'm doing down there. No, I'm going to Generate. That's where I'm going. And I'm going to go to Audio Spectrum. Let me turn off my transparency so I can actually see this. The audio spectrum will use a layer. There's my layer. And there is the animation. Okay, so you can see how these lines are moving up and down. That's what I'm going to use for my animation. I'm going to come down here to my hue interpolation. And if I do that, I get different colors. And then if I go to my thickness and I thicken these up, now they get thicker. If I go to my bands, that's basically how many lines I have there. I counted how many lines I had in mind. I think it was 12. Probably not 12, but let's just pretend it's 12. And then I turned the softness off. And then I turned the off. Same color on both of these, I believe. Yes? Yes, there we go. And now what I did is I just used my mask as the way to show those specific areas. I just put this right here at the bottom, here and here. Oops, there they are. All right, let me just turn that off for a second. It's way off. There and there. And I didn't have 12. I had, I don't know, 11, 10, 13? 13, thank you. And you'll see how it's on the bottom area. So now when it goes, it's just going to move up and down. Now it doesn't go very far, but then I can take the height and pull the height up. And then now I get this thing that will go, that's too far. There we go. That'll go just like that. And I didn't have to animate anything insane on here. I did play with it a bit more, but I didn't have to do any crazy animation on this or expressions. So, you know, just different things that you can add to your stuff. All right, back to this thing. And then I move the audio so it's synced up so that it happens, you know, at an appropriate time. All right, so let's say this is too big. I go to scale the null. I can scale it. I can move the position of the null. It'll move the position of that too. So if I want to start off at one side and move it to the other, I can do that. If you wanted your hologram to come in from off screen or come in from below and flip into the screen, you could do that too. Or it comes up and then lays down. However you want to do yours, I'm more concerned with it looking nice versus me telling you exactly what I want, right? Everyone's not going to have this exact thing. I don't want you to have the exact thing. I want you to have something that is yours that tells a story of your hologram, okay? All right. So the last stage. So this is pretty much like it's animated. It's 3D. If we look at our checklist, we've hit those marks. We just need to finish it up. Everything should be finished. It should look polished. So I'm going to add a solid. I'm going to drop it at the bottom. I'm going to make the solid also 3D. It will do this. In After Effects, when you have 3D items and they're on top of each other, you get this funky thing like this. Or if you have one item that's here and the other item is rotated, it'll actually cut into it. So I'm going to go to the position and move it backwards and then scale it up. There we go. All right. Now I'm going to add a light to this, just like I've shown before on the other ones. You can do a point light, you can do spotlights. Don't use ambient. That's a flat light. It doesn't look very good. Even parallel, it has its uses, but for this I would stick with one of these two. A point light is like a light bulb. It goes in all directions. A spotlight is a directioned light. So it starts at a spot and shines in one area. I'm going to give this a different color. Let's say I go with this orangey kind of tint. Like that. I don't want to cast shadows. Yeah, that's fine. A couple things. Intensity is how intense the light is, how bright it is. Radius is how big the light is. And then fall off distance is the drop off. Every light in the real world has an intensity at the start of it and it gradually drops off into nothingness. So we play with those later. So there's my light, crazy bright. I'll adjust it. I'm going to move it in the Z direction. Move it in the X direction. I'm going to look at it at the beginning and the end. Okay, you can see here it's like way too dark. You can't see anything. So let's double click that. Let's crank up the intensity some. Let's pull the fall off distance up some. There we go. Pull the intensity down. I kind of washed out some of that. That's too much. There we go. That's good. I'm going to duplicate it and scoot the light over to the other side. And I'm also going to grab the Z and pull it back some. The Z is the hardest one to grab because it's always like right there. But if you look at my cursor, I'm on top of it. There's Z, here's Y, and there's X. You can see how it automatically switches between those. Okay. Maybe I don't like this orange light. I don't like that. I'm going to go with blue. There we go. Orange and blue usually go together good, but in this case it's not. I need to desaturate that some. It's too much. And I'm going to pull that intensity down some. And again, I'm being very aware of the coloring. I'm being very aware of the look of this. Put that to full so we can actually see it. That's good. All right, so that looks pretty decent. The lighting on there, it looks better than it did a few minutes ago. We will get some variations as it's rotating. We'll see some of that light kind of moving across the surface. Let me put these lights on top. There you go. We'll notice that the background is gone. We don't see it. The light is just too far away from it, so I'm going to go back to my position. I'm going to scoot it closer. There it is. Okay, we see a little bit of it now. You can't see it at all, but it's there. I'm just going to verify that my hologram doesn't go through the background. Nope, that's good. What else do we want to put on here? All right, that's looking pretty good. All right, so now I want to put in some glows on top of this. I can do these a number of ways. One of the ways I can do it is simply going to stylize and going to glow. And I'm doing these on a per item basis. So my round dial gets one glow. My playlist will get another glow. My main area will get another glow. Glowing based on the color channels. Basically what that means is the brighter an item is, the more glowy it's going to be. You'll see the dark areas aren't glowing because they're not bright. The other areas are bright, so they do glow. I play with the threshold to kind of limit where that glow is happening. If it's low, everything's going to glow. If it's too high, nothing will glow. So you, again, find that happy medium where I get this glow in here. Glow radius, it's the radius, how far out the glow is going to go. And then the glow intensity is just how bright that glow is. Okay? So I'm going to go with, let's say, 1. That looks kind of neat. Composite the original behind typically is good. Glow operation add is fine. That's fine here. Color loops, color phase, yes. You can pick different glow colors. So let's say you wanted red, you can go to red. We don't see a huge change there because I didn't say to glow A and B colors. There we go. All right, so original colors is typically good. All right, so that's a good glow. I'm going to copy this and just paste it onto playlist. And if I need to tweak it, I'll tweak it. I think I just need to maybe pull up. I'll pull that down some. There we go. And I think it might be a little bit too, on that material options, it might be a little bit too specular shiny or metal. There we go. That's good there. I'm going to go to my main area, put a glow on this. Again, play with that threshold. Okay, way too glowy in there. Okay, and the radius is actually too big because that area was already big. That's good. I'll go to my levels, I'll paste it there, play with some of my settings. All right, that's good. Now I may also decide I want some transparency on this. I may want my, my dial and my background and everything to be somewhat transparent. I can just jump into any one of these, hit opacity, put 50%, and now it'll be opaque, but then we lose some of that glowy because everything is now lost. So if I jump into the round dial, there it is, I go to an adjustment layer. Just like I said before, adjustment layers, everything will affect that. Let me go to opacity, pull that down. I lied, that's not going to affect it. Let me go to channel. Blur. What am I looking for here? Keying. Yes, I'm going to go to keying. I'm going to go to extract. That's what I want. What this is going to do is it's going to take the white and black values and create transparency on it. So on this is the transparency. This is fully colored. If I pull the white area here, you'll see how that goes transparent. If I pull it back, it's opaque. So I may go like this and then pull this bottom one over and then pull this over. There we go. And now it's like semi-transparent. In the dark areas, it's fully opaque. In the blue areas, it's semi-transparent. And do the same thing on the other side. This is very much like you would have inside Photoshop when you use that tool inside there. Back to my comp. Now I have some transparency on here. I may need to then adjust my glow threshold. There it is. Pull it up some. Okay, and then go around and tweak that. Oops. And then I definitely want to check out something's happening there. What is that? That must be the glow coming in on there. I don't know if I like that. I'll have to fix that. Yeah, that's on all of them. I may have to keyframe the glow intensity also coming up too. That's an undesired effect in this case. All right, so I would just keyframe this glow intensity going from nothing to something. If I want to change my colors, I jump back to Illustrator where I drew all the stuff, grab what I want to change the colors on, change them, save it, and it'll automatically update. Just as a, for instance, I go to my UI here. Hopefully that's the right one, which it isn't. It's probably UI 003. There we go. I don't want these to be this color, so I grab this specific area. I go to the gray. I save it. I jump back to After Effects. I give it a second, and there it goes. It just updated. Now, it changed to red because inside my levels, inside of my background, oh, why did you change to red? Oh, somewhere else I must have changed the color on that. Levels here, here. Oh, I switched this to A and B. There we go. Okay, so that changed the color of that one. I guess I should have gone a bit more drastic. Let's go to orange or something. There we go. Save it, back here. And now if I go into here, it's making me allow, oh, there it is. I have a, it's on the adjustment layer, that's why. There it is. So I had the hue and saturation inside here that adjusted all of those types of things. Now, as one more little, for instance, animation type thing, let me go into a new composition here. And I'm just going to draw a circle like so. Get rid of the fill. Put a solid color on this. Okay, some of you might have this kind of setup where you have these circles and you want the circles to expand. I've showed that in one of my other examples. So I have this big circle, medium, smaller, and smallest. I can do a parenting structure where I connect these things together. So number 4 would be connected, let's say, to number 3. Number 3 would be connected to 2, and number 2 would be connected to 1. And what that means is if I grab 1 and move it, everything will move with it. If I grab 2 and move it, everything will move with that one except the big one. But here's where it turns out neat. Let's go to this, oops, and rotate this in the X direction like so, like that. Then I'm going to grab their positions. I'm going to rewind this. I'm going to set a keyframe at the beginning, go up a bit. There it is. And set a keyframe in the Z direction. So there's a Z here, a Z there, a Z here, and I'll leave the bottom one alone. And then what you'll see is that this type of animation, if it's not 4 seconds, it's actually a lot quicker. There you go. You'll see this thing actually like going up in this 3D form. Okay, so again, that might be some kind of animation you want to add to your stuff. Now if I take this, go to Comp 2, and I drop in that one, it looks like it's 3D here, but if I turn this on as a 3D layer and I rotate it, this is basically just like an item. It's a flattened out item. It's not actually 3D like we just saw it a second ago in the other composition. So just stuff to be aware of as you're doing your 3D stuff. If I wanted this to actually be 3D in the other one, I would grab these, I would copy it, I would paste it in here, and now I would have that as a 3D item that I could then utilize inside this composition as 3D items. But I have no purpose for it in here. Okay. Typically what I would do at the end of this, after I have all of this stuff set up, I would take this composition, rename it, put it into a new composition, and then I would look at the overall look. Do I like the brightness? Do I like the colors? Do I like all the other stuff? Maybe I would go into my color correction. Maybe I would add a curves to this and just adjust some of these things. Now I'm being kind of harsh on this just so you can see on the projector, but sometimes just doing something like that can really make your stuff pop a bit more than it would previously. Sometimes this is just a little bit too boring without it like that. Or maybe I want to go to my color correction and hue and saturation and desaturate it some, or maybe shift the colors a little bit. That's ugly, but I could shift the colors a little bit if it seemed appropriate. Okay? All right. So that should take you all the way to the end. Put your title card on, transition, your thing comes on, and then at the very end, transition to go away. Okay? It's pretty simple if you keep it simple. It's very complex if you keep it complex. All right? Questions?